From the Oklahoman Newsroom, this is an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here with OSU beat writer Nathan Ruiz. Nathan, Cowboys are done with their regular season now. The waiting begins until this weekend when the bowl invites are announced. We'll see where the Cowboys are headed for their bowl game. Lots still up in the air, though, because it really, while the Bulls have a picking order and they don't have to necessarily pick exactly where a team lays, it's going to depend on OU, Texas. Where do those teams fall? So give us some scenarios as it relates to that Big 12 championship game, how it could affect OSU.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for OSU. The Big 12 did fill all 7 of its bowl slots. Like Jenny mentioned, that does depend on what exactly happens with the Big 12 championship game and how that sorts out with the college football playoff. But as of right now, OSU's most likely positions are the Texas Bowl in Houston, the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, and the cheez-it Bowl in Phoenix. They could still end up in the Armed Forces Bowl, but it seems more likely that the Big 12 is going to end up with 2 teams in those New Year's Six bowls. The only case where that wouldn't happen would probably be if Oklahoma wins this weekend against Texas, but then doesn't make the playoff, then the Big 12 doesn't get those 2 teams in. So in all likelihood, you're probably fighting between Memphis and Houston. It just comes down to really to how those bowls perceive OSU versus the other 6-6 teams, those being Baylor and TCU.
Well, and it's interesting too because that Texas Bowl matchup is an SEC matchup. If Texas A&M, for example, is there, do they potentially like an in-state Lone Star State rivalry type of matchup with Baylor and Texas A&M, or is there a different matchup? That to me, Nathan, seems like the Texas Bowl scenario that might derail Oklahoma State getting there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely for sure, but also when you look at OSU's perception as a program now, you could argue that they would have that brand, that maybe OSU Texas A&M would be a bigger matchup. So it's just hard to know how these bowls perceive because it's based on picks, it's not based on standings. OSU actually finished 9th in the Big 12 based on tiebreakers, but that won't be the deciding factor. It's just whether the Texas Bowl likes Baylor, TCU, or OSU more. And of course, it could just happen that they get forced and things get pushed down. Iowa State could end up in the Texas Bowl based on how things fall in the rest of the Big 12. So there's still a lot up in the air for Oklahoma State, but it's just a matter of how this team is perceived, a team that has 2 top 10 wins, almost a third, but also lost several games that as OSU looks back on the season will be really disappointed to have lost.
Well, and some of these bowls, the idea that you could have a team in there that has an offense that scored, 40-something against Oklahoma, 40-something against West Virginia. I mean, offense tends to get people to come to games versus a 9-6 game. So if they think that the OSU team that scored all those points is going to come to their bowl, that has to play in Oklahoma State's favor as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You want the team that beat Texas, beat West Virginia, almost beat OU, but if you get the team that OSU put out there against Kansas State and TCU, you're going to have a pretty poor product. So teams are going to have to evaluate, or bowls are going to have to evaluate that, make that decision. OSU will end up in a disappointing bowl based on where it saw itself being at the start of the year. But to be in this position where it's 6-6, likely in Memphis against a SEC opponent or in Houston against an SEC opponent, whether that's Missouri or Texas A&M, could get a throwback Big 12 matchup. So I think it'll be exciting for the Cowboys. I think it'll be exciting for Cowboy fans, even if the season ended disappointingly. All
right, again, Sunday is the day after the playoff teams are announced, the New Year's Six bowls are announced. Then we'll start to see those other bowls filter down and who they're going to pick. We'll find out where the Cowboys are headed bowling. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.